One of the biggest criticisms against modern-day comic book movies has been the death tolls. Man of Steel was singled out especially for the widespread death and destruction throughout Superman and General Zod's climactic battle against Metropolis, as skyscrapers are toppled and presumably thousands are injured or killed. The same critique applies to the Battle of New York from the Avengers. Valid criticisms, but in fact the films are just staying true to the comic book source material, where entire countries get wiped out anytime there's a new supervillain who needs to prove he's super duper serious. Realities have been deleted, populations have been eradicated, and, well, it's not all that nice. I'm Yoon from What Culture, and here are 10 comic book catastrophes that killed millions. Number 10, the Gotham Earthquake. No Man's Land. Death toll? Hundreds. Starting off with a rather tame catastrophe, comparatively speaking at least, is the Great Gotham Earthquake, which pretty much ruined the city and kicked off the year-long No Man's Land storyline, which saw Batman's home being evacuated following a 7.6 magnitude tremor, which tears the streets apart and kills a bunch of people. There was this big earthquake and a bunch of people died. The bridges into Gotham were destroyed and nobody was allowed in or out. A fair few perished in the immediate natural disaster, but scores more expired in the aftermath thanks to famine, illness, or supervillains doing what supervillains do best when martial law is declared. Number 9. Nitro detonates, destroys a school bus. Civil War. Death toll, 612. A notch up from that is the inciting incident that eventually kicked off Civil War, the Marvel crossover event orchestrated by Mark Miller and Stephen McNiven that saw Marvel's superhero population divided over whether or not they should acquiesce to a new law that demanded they disclose their secret identity to the US government, and essentially work as a trained-up responsible agent for them. Unsurprisingly, many weren't happy about that. The whole reason for that about turn from the government occurred right at the start of the main Civil War series, when the New Warriors came out to play and launched a sneak attack on a C-list group of supervillains whilst being filmed for their reality TV show. The untested rookie group of heroes can't quite handle the situation though, with explosive bad guy Nitro detonating himself as they approach. He destroyed several city blocks, including an elementary school at the epicenter, resulting in the death of over 600 civilians, 60 of whom were children, with just Speedball of the Warriors and Nitro himself surviving. And then Speedball became the emo as heck vigilante penance, with 612 spikes inside his costume, the pain constantly reminding him of the deaths he had caused. Basically me in high school. Number 8, Norman Osborn blows up a football stadium. Siege. Death toll, thousands. In comparison to many of the catastrophes that have rocked comic books over the years, the Civil War thing seems like a drop in the ocean, especially when you consider that, just a couple of years later, an even bigger and more tragic disaster was orchestrated by Norman Osborn as the inciting incident that kicked off the 2010 crossover event Siege, which nobody really remembers because it was a bit rubbish. In Siege, he used that power to launch out an all-out assault on Asgard, which turned out to be because Loki was manipulating him. How did he get the US government on board with waging war on a mythical land that was then, for complicated, stupid reasons, moored within New York City? By getting his right-hand man the Hood and his UFO cronies to implicate Volstagg, an Asgardian, in the massacre of thousands of innocent spectators at a football match at Soldier Field Stadium in Chicago. Number 7, the Bloodhaven chemo drop. Infinite Crisis. Death toll, 100,068. Given the sense of scope and scale you can manage in comic books, where you essentially have an infinite budget, so long as the artist doesn't get too tired of drawing, compared to films, the death tolls tend to be equally gargantuan. Such is the case with this list going onwards. So much death. As quickly things kick up a notch from city blocks and stadiums full of innocent people being offed, to entire cities being wiped off the map, as was the unfortunate fate of Bloodhaven in Infinite Crisis. A city south of Gotham that was loosely modelled on New Jersey and which served as a stomping ground for former Robin Dick Grayson in the Nightwing guise, the whole thing was destroyed halfway through Infinite Crisis, another of those universe-resetting DC crossover events that culminated in a Superboy from an alternate world, punching reality so hard it shattered. Bloodhaven's fate was sealed long before any of that, however, with the secret society of supervillains deciding to drop chemo, a huge semi-intelligent pile of chemicals, on the city, causing a devastating explosion and a toxic chemical fallout. Their city is destroyed, Nightwing, Batgirl, and Robin survive, and Superman and the Teen Titans did their best to evacuate civilians, but official sources later reported the resulting death toll at 100,068. Number 6. The Genosha Massacre. New X-Men. Death toll 16 million. That's a whole city getting destroyed. Now, how about an entire continent? When Grant Morrison and Frank quietly decided to bring Marvel's mightiest mutants kicking and screaming into the 21st century, they didn't pull any punches. One of the early issues of New X-Men saw Charles Xavier putting a gun to his head and threatening to blow his brains out if a psychic attacker didn't quit occupying his thoughts. That's pretty hardcore. The attacker in question was Cassandra Nova, Xavier's evil twin who he thought he'd killed during a psychic battle in the womb. Somehow she survived regardless and held a deep resentment against the mutant race ever since, which inspired her attack against her brother and his X-Men. It also caused her to wage war against mutant kind as a whole, and hey presto, that's how the Genosha Massacre came about. To that end, she redesigned the Sentinels to be even better at their lethal job than ever before, and then let them loose on Genosha, the utopian island nation off the African coast that served as a place for mutants to live free of prejudice and fear, at least until the entire island was reduced to rubble and its mutant population was slain by Nova's wild Sentinels, with very few surviving. Number 5. Jon Stewart fails to protect Jansi. Cosmic Odyssey. Death toll, a whole planet. What's the only thing worse than the destruction of an entire country? Well, try an entire planet. Jon Stewart is one of the better Green Lanterns out there and my personal favourite of the bunch, at least compared to Hal Jordan, who was once corrupted by an evil alien force into going insane and decimating half the galaxy, and his replacement Kyle Rayner, the man for whom the unfortunate concept of women in refrigerators was coined. Even Stewart dropped the ball every so often though, with the most damning stain on his permanent Space Corps record being the time he failed to protect the planet Janshi from being devoured by an avatar of the anti-life equation. The event, during the 1988 Cosmic Odyssey mini-series, earned him the ire of John Johns, the Martian Manhunter, and resulted in the creation of the villainess known as Fatality. Stewart was so cut up about his failure, he even contemplated suicide. John got over that in the end, and the other John forgave him, but the anti-life equation still did wipe out an entire planet roughly the size of Earth. Number 4. Ultron and Phalanx wipe out the Kree. Annihilation Conquest. Death toll, billions. The assorted Annihilation crossovers have been given a new lease of life in light of the renewed popularity of the cosmic side of the Marvel Universe. Before that, the miniseries was relatively unloved compared to other events happening around the same time, despite them having some rather far-reaching consequences, such as, for example, the fact that 2008's Annihilation Conquest, a sequel to the earlier Annihilation, saw the murderous self-aware robot Ultron teaming up with interplanetary hive mind menace Phalanx to conquer the galaxy, which, despite the intervention of the Guardians, Kazar, and Nova, they very nearly do. Despite Adam Warlock returning and apparently being their savior, Ultron and the Phalanx wipe out the majority of the Kree during battle and by infecting them with a techno-virus. A whole planet? How about a whole intergalactic race? Number 3. Thanos deletes half of existence. The Infinity Gauntlet. Death toll, even more billions. Never one to be outdone, the Marvel Universe's primo despot Thanos managed to outdo the death toll of Annihilation Conquest by a significant margin, and a good couple of decades before the Phalanx arrived on the scene to mess up the Kree to boot. Everyone knows his deal, right? Basically, Thanos fancies death. Like the actual physical manifestation of death, the Marvel Universe's Grim Reaper. Being the physical manifestation of death, Thanos figures that only widespread murder is the only thing that will impress her, which is what usually fuels his desire to collect all those Infinity Gems, stick them in a glove, and wield ultimate omniversal power. All powerful and desperate to win the affections of death, once Thanos collects all the stones in the 1991 limited series, The Infinity Gauntlet, he clicks his fingers and erases half the sentient life in the universe. Just like that. Poof. Gone. I don't want to go, Mr. Stark. like it never happened. Besides, well, all the billions across the galaxy, amongst the dead in this instance are most of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four and all the hearts and souls of the MCU faithful when it was adapted in 2018. I still need counseling.
I don't feel so good.
You're all right.
I don't know what's happening.
Number 2, The Incursions. New Avengers. Death toll, tens of billions. Still, it could be even worse than that. All of the X-Men could have been erased from existence multiple times over, with increasing severity and an assured amount of pain. Jonathan Hickman's superb run on the intertwining Avengers and New Avengers titles saw the team having to deal with a series of incursions, which sent the multiverse collapsing in on itself about as quickly as I do when someone tells me Constantine is pronounced Constantine. Look, we've been through this, guys. It is Constantine. Constantine! Thanks to some cosmic gubbins, alternate Earths also started to crash into the main Marvel universe, which threatened to spell the end of not only the main Marvel universe, but all the multiverses in existence. As such, a secretive group of Avengers who call themselves the Illuminati had to figure out a way to stop this. Much to the chagrin of Captain America, Tony Stark and Reed Richards come up with a weapon to destroy those alternate Earths before they have a chance to end their own, resulting in the deaths of trillions. Number 1, multiple universes wiped out. Every single DC event. Death toll, even more billions. If you think all that incursion business makes the Marvel Universe seem pretty cold, then you didn't reckon on DC. Both the heroes and editorial staff of the distinguished competition have pulled the trigger on multiple universes multiple times, beginning with the classic 80s Crisis on Infinite Earth series, which saw the publisher attempting to streamline their fictional universe by erasing all of these alternate realities created during goofy Silver Age stories, which I hold very close to my heart. In doing so, they removed the concept of a multiverse from DC Comics altogether, and killed off both Supergirl and longtime Flash Barry Allen in the process. There's not an actual figure you can put on it, but considering the title of Infinite Earths, that's like an infinite amount of universe. That's countless billions of deaths, if not a trillion, or even a centillion, which Wikipedia claims is the biggest number. The more you know. Basically, the same plot was rehashed with 1994's Zero Hour and 2005's Infinite Crisis, which means that they've wiped out an infinite amount of worlds multiple times. When you put it that way, DC aren't just supervillains. They're the worst mass murderers in history, and they're still at large.